The construction skill is being raised from 99 to 120 this summer, going by the 2026 update roadmap. And when Jagex moderator Ramen said,
"We're still in early design at the moment, so we would love to hear what you would like to see from player-owned housing,"
a RuneScape player took that as a personal challenge. Gamez X posted his ideas on the RuneScape Reddit, creating a massive design document of suggestions for this update. It was so massive, in fact, that it caught the attention of Jagex moderator Ramen himself. So far, they've announced a new recipe system allowing you to create quest-themed furniture, showing off some of them like this bathtub, the frog eel chair, a bunch of god altars, some new benches, a gilded stove, some room dividers, a massive collection of new wooden themes for your furniture, and various elven-inspired themes. So let's dive into this design document full of suggestions and see what he's cooked up. Just note, these are all unofficial player suggestions. None of this has been announced, and the update is still scheduled for sometime in summer, so it's still a ways out. Oh, and I'm sure the Falador Massacre house party taking place around the 6th of June 2006, and this suggestion post having 666 upvotes is just a coincidence and not a bad omen. The first suggestion is quite obvious. This is a design from old school. If you're familiar with construction there, the entire skill was pretty much rewritten at one point and cleaned up. They designed a whole new menu where you can move around rooms very easily. All you have to do is select a room, click move, and then you can put it in a new square somewhere else. You can also rotate the rooms to left and right with this menu. It's an easy way to delete the rooms. And down here, you can select the height of your house that you would like to view on the map itself. So upstairs, ground, and dungeon. Currently, nothing like this exists in RuneScape. If you want to move a room, you have to delete it or just create it somewhere else and build everything over again. There is no way to move a room somewhere else. He also suggests being able to place furniture anywhere. Currently, there's select hotspots around the room, and you have to build your furniture on these hotspots. There's no way to decorate or move these around the room. I just don't know if RuneScape is able to do something like that, but it would be a great change. Now, the current style of houses is quite limited, so he's added all these different themes that could potentially be added to the housing walls. Dark wood from Canifis, or you've got the fancy dark stone from Darkmire. These wall patterns are inspired by the 2009 Halloween event in Death's Mansion. I personally like this one a lot. It's just, there's no real reason. I just really like this, but totally doesn't have anything to do with it being so purple. The snowy cabin from the Christmas village. And you also got Eastern land themes, crystal themes from Prifddinas, fancy whitewashed stone from Menethos, you got red brick from Anachronia, or you've got the ancient buildings in Santistan. Now, obviously, all of these probably won't make it in, and some of the kits might just not work that well for the player-owned house, but they're all ideas, right? Today, we're not thinking about what's possible. Today, we're just spitballing all kinds of things that could be cool to add. He also does mention that all the old styles that currently exist in houses are quite dated, and having those brought up with new textures and details would possibly be good too. Now, currently, housing spots just sit on a green spot of land. Beyond that spot, it's just nothing. There's just a void. So he suggests that adding some foliage around, perhaps a forest clearing. You can't walk into the forest, but it just adds a bit more depth and blocking, making it more realistic. You know, like, oh, now your house is in a forest, for example, rather than floating in the void. Or you've got a private island where there's a beach around it. Maybe you wouldn't be able to walk into the water, right? You could have it on top of a mountain pass. You could have a nice view out across the forest, for example, much like the nature runecrafting altar, possibly. Or you could have it in an underground base, like have the underground pass walls or just rock walls around it in general. Or craziest idea, but frankly the most fitting if you ask me, since the house already is floating in the void, just have it floating in the air instead. Just create a sky island out of it, like the clan citadels. Next up, the ability to fill in doorways you don't want. Currently in construction, both in Old School and RuneScape 3, you get doors assigned to your room, specifically in spots where the doors are lined up in the room design. Sometimes they just go outside, and maybe you don't want to have them go outside. It just creates this weird gap into nowhere. So you could just fill up a wall there if you wanted to. Also, the housing portal is something that you're not able to change. He suggests being able to decorate that with different things, for example, ornate marble. Various different themes there too, like a gilded portal, a limestone portal, maybe an obsidian one or crystal and bone one. Those are all themes for furniture that already exists. could even go further with that idea, really. Even Old School added a orange portal now recently with their Dead Man mode rewards, I believe. That is exclusive, though, to the Wilderness Player Owned House theme, I believe. Here he suggests different additional things that could be added to the normal garden, new different centerpieces, for example, statues, and even a farming compost bin. I don't know how useful that would be inside of a house, but the idea is there. Potentially some different ponds, and even potentially just decorating it without plants, you know, like small bones, for example, or crystal outcrops, various different mushrooms. In Old School's formal garden, I believe, or in one of the gardens, you can create beehives. Now, as far as I'm aware, I don't think they do much, but you can get stung by them and make bees come out of them. So here's a few different ideas for new plants that could be added to the different garden spots. I'm a big fan of the pumpkin. I love pumpkins myself, so I would love having some pumpkins placed around. You can even have some cactuses or large crystal outcrops like in Tarthiad, for example. There is a tree spot where you can add a few different types of trees, and as far as I'm aware, I believe this is the only spot where you can get the old magic tree still. There is a plea here to keep the old magic tree, but maybe just update it, but keep it in the same style because magic trees were vastly changed. So keeping those sparkles coming out of the leaves would be a cool feature. Maybe you could have both, like a retro magic tree and a modern magic tree. As for the dungeon entrance, having different kinds of entrances, not just a rock one, for example, a small pyramid, or like a volcano entrance, hollow tree entrance, for example, like the one in Lumbridge Swamp. Keeping up with the garden theme, we've got the formal garden here, and also has a centerpiece, which you could add things to. Here he's saying flowers like the star bloom, which is a relatively new one to RuneScape. And then you got white lilies, black flowers, nightshades, potentially. As for centerpieces, you could have this one, I believe, is from the Saradome and Dig site over by Everlight. You've got Dragonkin statues, you've got Eastern Land statues, you've got Stone of Jas. Warning on that one, though, you might attract some Dragonkin. You should be fine in RuneScape 3, though. I'm not going to say why, but you should be fine. If you know, you know. Obviously, what is a house without a good fountain? Having different kinds of fountains. You could even expand them into a more Gothic fountain, for example, or add some moss. This one is from the Wizard's Tower, and this one is the Old Draenor Manor fountain. He also adds that you could potentially include a crystal changing system where if you create a crystal item in your house, you could purchase a crystal in Prifddinas of a specific color from the specific clans, and then you could use that on this crystal object to change its color to whatever color that clan is. Also dropping in a kind of interesting idea here for clue scroll enthusiasts or people with a lot of money. If you have a fountain, dropping a clue scroll die into it to recolor it with whatever color of the die is. So you could potentially add a blood fountain with a blood dye, an ice fountain with an ice dye, or even a soul fountain, which would be kind of neat with the soul dye. Expensive, but kind of a cool idea, to be honest. Also mentions one of the bosses of Old School, Hespori, adding that one as a potential centerpiece, which moves around. Could also do like a large totem pole, maybe a skeleton of a beast, or a Karadet shadow pylon, for example. There is also the possibility of adding a dummy that you can attack inside of your house, but he says since these are in War's Retreat and there's far more accessibility there with a bank and also adrenaline crystals nearby, he says maybe you could just remove that potentially. Or if you want to double down on the dummy idea in your house, maybe add a adrenaline crystal option inside your house. Here's a suggestion to include a new type of garden, one from Old School, a superior garden. This one allows you to grow a spirit tree and fairy ring as the centerpiece and also change its theme to a couple different versions. This one also has a very popular feature in Old School, the rejuvenation pool that heals your health, prayer, and pretty much everything. If you're poisoned, it heals you. Refills your run energy. Frankly, it's one of the biggest quality of life changes you can get with your construction training. A lot of those don't apply to RuneScape 3, but you know, the idea is there. He says that you could potentially add the Uglug pool effects to it, since there's not a whole lot of purpose for prayer restore and all that in RuneScape 3. You just do that at War's Retreat anyway. He mentions that the toppy area of the tree for this garden you can actually cut into shapes of bosses you've defeated. He goes on to suggest a whole bunch of different themes that could potentially be superior garden themes for RuneScape 3. Here's an outworldly one, which inspired by Tarthiad, the Elven homeland. You got volcanic, which is Tsar themed, or a tropical one for a beach. You've got the wilderness theme, which is cool. Snowy theme, you've got verdant theme, and nice tiles and grass. Got a desert theme there, a swampy theme for Mauritania, and then also an ancient theme, which I love. We need this one. This one is 100% getting my vote. The Rosian garden theme with purple grass. It says that the centerpiece generally has a teleport option in Old School, So you could create the wilderness pylons, for example. There is a Menethite obelisk, which would teleport you around the city of Menephos. Crystal Spire could teleport you around the city of Prifddinas. Turtle Portal, which thematically doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because I think the turtle portals are all connected out in the Eastern Lands, and they don't send you very far. Like, the whole point is that they're very, like, small distance teleports. But hey, this is just ideas, right? We're throwing out there. It's not a bad idea. And then the Orphan device that's connected to Anachronia's different locations. And then obviously you do have to suggest the spirit trees that are the staple of old school ones. A lot of people have those, as well as the fairy rings. You could potentially have a Drummond tree style particle effect coming out of it and have it a little bit more mystical. Magic Zygomite looking spirit tree. This could potentially scale with your farming level, because farming also goes up to 120. So having high level in farming could potentially give you new styles for your spirit tree. It goes on to say that you could have some seasonal ones as well, like a Rose Petal Effect spirit tree, Bee Aura Effect for the summer tropical spirit tree, a dark bat themed for a more fall evil looking spirit tree. I love the face on that one too, it's very creepy. And then a snowfall one for the Christmas version. Okay, we're finally heading inside the house now. We've done a lot of gardening so far. At the moment there isn't much color variation or choice, so he suggests a couple different changes there. For example, red, blue, and green. I think purple should also be one of those colors, but you know, it's just me. Also got like it looks like a wilderness themed one here. Or a more like hunter themed one, which could be cool, could tie into hunter somehow, and hunter is going up to 110 soon. So he mentioned that the fireplaces could do with the graphic rework, and I think frankly everything in player-owned houses could do with the graphical rework. But he mentions that the fireplaces aren't really ever used because you need to put actual physical logs into them and then light the fire. Says that maybe you should just be able to turn the fire off and on. There's a lot of housing systems in games that just lets you turn on and off effects on it. For example, the one that comes to mind is Palia. They have a really good housing system, and you can just walk over to a fireplace there and click on, and then it'll just turn on fire. Same with lights and stuff there. If you just walk over it and you activate it, then it turns on. I think that would add a cozy ambience to parlors. Now there's a bookcase in parlors normally. Suggests that there could be new cabinets on different versions. Shelves, perhaps. Could store different things in them. There's a lot of cool shelves around Santistan. If you go inside those buildings there's a lot of decoration and clutter in those with different books and potions and skulls. And there's definitely a lot of cool looking furniture that they could just take from the overworld and implement into the housing system. So if we move on to the kitchen. Now, in old school, there's an item sold by a construction shop called condensed gold. It's generally just a gold looking chocolate bar. I think the idea is that it's 8 gold bars connected into one, but it looks like a golden chocolate bar to me. And it's very expensive, and it creates the golden sink. It's just a gold sink, right? That's the joke. It's a gold sink. It's cool. I like it. It's just add golden things to every single spot you could create stuff in and just have it be massively expensive. It's not really my color scheme personally, but I mean, if you want to flex how much cash you've got, why not? It says obvious expansion to larders. They only go up to teak at the moment. They didn't even get a mahogany one, so adding more of those would be an obvious thing to do. It says that you could add different pre-made versions of various kinds of dough, raw meat, red berries, dwellberries, grapes, chocolate, aqua leaves, and milk, expanding on the range of stuff you can collect out of it as you upgrade it. Similar with shelves, you can store cake tins, for example, bowls, pie dishes. Now, the spice rack was an interesting idea. It says that old school has a spice rack, and you can add the Evil Dave spice from the Recipe for Disaster quest. Can effectively go and hunt the spices from the Hello Rats and then store those spices in your spice rack in your house. And then you can take them out on demand if you need to. Really, it just saves you some bank space because you could just keep them in your bank otherwise, but I think it's a neat idea to have there. I've been maxed too long to really know how useful those boosts are, but you know, it's an idea. It says that the cat basket needs an update, but also potentially being able to store a single cat or a single dog in the basket that wanders from that spot or sometimes sleeps in it. There's an ale barrel spot, and he says expanding that with new ales, for example, just allowing you to take out as much ale as you would like from it, really. Old School has also introduced a couple new ales that don't exist in RuneScape 3. For example, Elven Dawn or Bloody Bracers. So into the dining room, obviously you'd want to upgrade the fireplace there and the table as well, but he mentions that wall decorations could do with some love. So he suggests having, for example, a shield and 2 swords or a bow and arrow. Could have 2 scimitars, just generally wall themes that you would like to have. Maybe some torches or a gargoyle even, having that watching you eat. Maybe potentially wall plants as well. even go as far as maybe tapestry that shows off different quest series that you've done. Going by the frog eel chair that they showed off, it seems like that's something they like to lean into a little bit, which is cool. I like that idea. Adding more things that remind you of different stories that you've done. Potentially adding new servants, for example, like gnome or Zygomite, an imp or a fairy, a goby, for example, clay golem maybe, grumpy werewolf who fled Mauritania, a sea siren, I vaguely remember those from player-owned ports, or maybe even a skeleton or ghost from that would actually be kind of cool. He also says in the dining room that it always felt like the table was quite empty and lacking. I mean, you can place down food on it if you would like, but maybe being able to add hotspots to the table, like just always having food visible, and maybe some candles as well. If you did the anniversary event in Lumbridge this year, you probably noticed how full those tables were there with massive amounts of food. Just add the same graphics into the player-owned house's dining room. For the workshop, he points out that, well, back in old school, it made sense to have the tool storages because it was a very convenient place to find all tools that you might need. But since we have the tool belt in RuneScape now, we don't really need those tool spots anymore, so potentially just removing those entirely would be an idea. So here he suggests a couple new things that could be added in the room instead of the tool spots. For example, a furnace, forge, or anvil, a loom for spinning a different wool, spinning wheel for doing string, a fletching workbench, which is popular in the fort, invention workbench, which is always useful to have in new locations, a potential sawmill and stone cutter, which you use a lot in the fort as well, in the workshop, or just a pottery wheel and an oven. For the skill hall, he opens up by saying it would be nice if the rug and the staircase could be separated, because currently you can only have either a rug or a staircase, but you can't have both. And I agree with that. It does make the room feel a bit more empty without a rug as well as the staircase. And again, you could tie in the hunter skill with the rugs to add animal pelts, for example, to that spot. Now, I would say the problem with a rug would potentially be that you can create a downward staircase, in which case the rug would have a hole in the middle, most likely, and it would clip if you didn't think of that or consider it. So I'm sure that's why we currently can't have a rug as well as stairs. And then obviously graphical update. I don't think we need to really mention all the graphical updates because I'm sure they're planning to do that for the update itself. He also suggests updating the armor stands to now just simply being possible to add armor to. So you'd either create a armor stand of craftable items or an armor stand for minigame items, and then you could apply the armor to that stand. And he also says that it's weird that the armor stands never included the legs in any of the designs. It's always just the helmet, the chest, and then a shield, I believe. So including more pieces of the armor set would also be nice. And it also says that you could extend it from simply being Castle Wars armor on the minigame one to potentially Void armor or Obsidian armor, maybe even the Clue Scroll sets. Like the enchanted robes or a third age, second age. And then for the smithing stand, you'd have everything from bronze all the way up to primal armor. You could potentially also have masterwork if you hate yourself that much and want to make another set, or just buy it, I guess, from someone. Now there's currently a rune display case. He suggests turning that into more of like a magical rock sort of thing. So instead, it seems like you've essentially got a massive chunk of rune essence that you then imbued with something like astral, for example, in this picture, and it'll just project the rune above the stone itself. And that would obviously tie into rune crafting, and you'd need the rune crafting level to do that. As for the head trophies, expanding that could be an exciting way to show off some achievements, potentially boss kill count. A similar concept to the armor stands where you create a mount on the wall and then you can apply and remove the heads as you would like. Lets you customize more without having to destroy the entire spot itself and lose the head in the process. It says that different tiers of displays could have different heads. And then you could push it up with mahogany to, for example, abyssal demons or strike worms, dark beasts. And then for the gilded one, you could have bosses. For example, Kingdom of Dragons, one that I believe we have at the moment, Calfight Queen, the Abyssal Lords, potentially those are Slayer tasks, Wyverns, Ripper Demons, and higher level stuff, essentially, for higher level displays. Fishing Trophy could do with some expanding as well. It only has quite a few old fish on it. Could include different fish like lobsters, rainbow fish, going all the way up to swordfish, wobbegongs, and great white sharks. Hunter Trophies 2 would be a new addition. Similar idea, you'd hunt for different creatures, and maybe there's a rare chance of getting the head of the creature you're hunting, and then you can display that. Or you've got a butterfly and impling wall. And, I feel like it's a little bit grim to have a flatly squished impling inside of a display case, but I guess that's the idea of Hunter, isn't it? Could go as far as to have the big game Hunter dinosaurs as different head trophies as well. Now, additionally, from old school, there is a cape rack trophy for displaying your different capes. You can add different 99 capes. You could add a master cape, a completionist cape to it. Though I thought that one was in the achievement room rather than in the skill hall. But maybe we don't have an achievement room, so that's why it's being fit in here. RuneScape 3 doesn't have an achievement room as far as I'm aware. So here we're expanding a bit on the quest hall. And the obvious option here is to add more portraits, right, of different quests. You've got a nice illustration of Vampirium here, for example. And then the idea here is if you went up to the picture and pressed, for example, a look option on it, it would expand to be a bigger resolution of the photo itself. So you get basically you're enhancing the photo to see it better. You could also add more landscapes like the Wilderness, Santistan, Anachronia, Haven Height, once that releases. Maybe Tarthiad, Freniscay, Mazcab, and Vampirium if you want different worlds as well that you can visit. Though you would only be visiting them through photos. This is a landscape portrait, not a portal. Then also you've got the iconic poses that were added as portraits. And then draw me like you're a French girl poses. Or of course the very cool looking Elder God art. Also say that you could have potentially a portrait of King Baxtorian or Lord Dracan, maybe Rabid Jack, just important quest characters that you might have fought or defeated at some point. Maybe even the Pharaoh or Zanuck if you want to have her in your house. Also, I kind of like the idea here where he's suggesting that we steal these from the locations they're in at Santistan and then just move them to our house. Like, oh, it's mine now. This is going in my personal collection. Also suggests having a map on the wall. Obviously, it would be like a scroll theme, like it's been drawn out by hand and hung up on a wall rather than an actual world map. But yeah. And then a sword display where you can display your favorite swords, for example. And again, he suggests a blank display that you'd be able to place whatever sword you wanted on, really. Now, you could do quest ones like Excalibur or Silverlight, for example, but then also maybe even things like God Swords or higher level weapons. Replica of the Elder Blade, for example, Elder Mirror, Staff of Armadyl. Now, there's the games room, which generally doesn't get used much. There's like a hoop toss, there's a guessing game, Hangman, a rock, there's a orb, and then there's a reward chest. I can't remember the last time I did any of those. It says that potentially you could be teleported into old random events from different spots in the room, like the Old Man's Maze, for example, or the Crane random event. In RuneScape, it's not possible to play those things anymore. I don't necessarily think that these things are necessary. Frankly, I don't think that the game room is ever going to become popular again. But yeah, don't put too much dev time in the game room. But I could be wrong. Maybe people would love to play Hangman together. We've got a dartboard or an archery board. The attack stone has massively lost out on the inflation of life points. So I think you can very easily break that thing now. That would have to be scaled up vastly. But the idea was that you fought it and then it would break at some point. Suggests updating the balance element, just give it some new particle effects. He suggests introducing the game room, you know, the one in Berthorpe, those kinds of games into the room. Just having a little table where you can play, for example, checkers, or just having all kinds of different mini games on the table, like Sudoku, for example. There is a version of Sudoku in-game through the Rogue Traders, where you play with runes rather than numbers. There could be sliding puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, various two-player games like Rune Link, and Rune Squares, like the Berthorpe Games Room. Could even throw in some puzzles from Clue Scrolls, like the Tower puzzles, the Celtic Knots, or Celtic Knots. And why not add a lever on the wall you can pull to release balloons into the room, or maybe even balloon animals. Just for the heck of it, they might not have anything in them. Maybe they will. Into the combat room, a good suggestion would be to add the adrenaline crystal. That way people can charge up before they fight each other. Also suggests the potion cauldron that has been seen a couple times during PVM bossing events. Says that you could fill that up with various different potions, for example overload, and then you'd just be able to drink those. But then obviously you'd want to balance it out, so you can't just take the boosts with you, so maybe all of your stats get reset once you leave the house. So you can't just smuggle that really strong potion out of your house. Also, there's something about a dwarven challenge barrel through microtransactions here that is currently being phased out, obviously, since microtransactions are being removed. So saying to reintroduce this as like I think it's a DPS race dummy. So whoever does the most damage in a certain amount of time gets first prize. There's like nothing special you get from it. I think that's what that is. Potentially moving the combat dummy into the combat room as well. And you could add, for example, a black mask to it like they've done in old school, where it now acts as like a slayer target. So it's susceptible to that kind of stuff. You could add ectoplasm to the dummy so it works like an undead target, and then various different items you could use on the dummy to unlock certain different weaknesses. In RuneScape, you've got undead weakness, dragon weakness, demon weakness, and that kind of stuff. It says there isn't much to add to the chapel because they've already showed off the concept art of new altars that they're planning to release into this system. Some of them are even in game already, like the Saradomin one that you can check out at different altars. Suggests that the rug on the floor should match the altar, though potentially you could just create the rug whatever color you want anyway. He says that you could potentially also add god altars for V or the Menophyte Pantheon, specifically Tumikin and Eclarin and Amasket, and then potentially even Elder God altars. So, moving on to the portal chamber, which for all intents and purposes really doesn't have a whole lot of use in RuneScape. Now, with the release of construction, portals were fantastic. They went everywhere, you know, and didn't have to use any runes. There's so many different ways to not need to use runes, plus so many teleports without using runes or the magic spell, that we don't really know what they would do with the portal chamber. As far as in old school, they've created the portal nexus, which is just one massive teleport inside of a room that you can fill up with teleports. And once you've added 1,000 teleports into it, you've unlocked permanent teleports to that location. And so a meta in old school is teleport to your house, use the portal nexus to go somewhere, because it's just so convenient having all those portals in one place. But I don't think it would be as useful in RuneScape. Yeah, he mentions here with the portal nexus, you pay 1,000 times a teleport in runes to permanently add the teleport to a list. He also says you could add smaller portals around the big portals. But yeah, generally, I don't know how useful a portal room would be, really. Because in RuneScape, we also have the lodestone system, which is super convenient. Why would you teleport to your house just to teleport to some city when you can just use the lodestone network anyway, right? For the study, he says, the problem is everyone builds the highest level things in the study, so every study looks the same. So he would like to swap this up a bit. You'd have different charts, for example, that have different displays on them. Maybe if you create a scroll, hang it on the wall, and then study on it, then your character will create some kind of design for it. Maybe like you have a set of 10 different designs that randomly get selected when you use that option. That way you mix up the look of the room a little bit more. He suggests adding the RuneScape calendar system in here, just like studying some kind of calendar on the wall, and that would pop up the calendar. Though it's pretty accessible already, so I don't know if you would really need that. But you've also got a potential zodiac chart, which was showcased 8 years ago, he says, but hasn't really been used since then. So I think that's probably been phased out. But I mean, it's an option for something to add in. You've got anatomical charts, you know, those ones with the hands in different positions. You could do that for different races in RuneScape if you've got the art budget and want to make some concepts. And then he says connecting in with the globe and the aura and all that. You could have a universal map that shows the different planes of existence in the RuneScape universe. So you'd see where Vampirium is in contrast to the Earth we're on, like Gielinor, right? You could have like lines between them, which is the world gate connecting the different worlds. In old school, a new marble lectern was added, which combined the effects of the eagle lectern and the demon lectern. So you could create any kind of tablet that you would like on that, rather than having to rebuild it in different versions. It says that introducing that here would be nice. I'm not sure how many people will even use the tablet system anymore, but you know, maybe there are, so maybe that would be a use case. He brings up, how do we have a study, but no desk in the study? Says that they could be very similar to the one, the command center of Fort 4 and 3, where you can check different weekly things through it. For example, your archaeology research, or the Anachronia base camp, or managing miscellanea. And then he adds in the globe. Now, the globe is something you can display in the study as well. He says, why not be able to show different worlds and their adjacent planets or stars on the aura, so it breaks up the monotony of everyone having the same globe. So you could have a globe depicting Frenescae, for example, or you could have one depicting Tardiad. Here's one with Infernus, for example. This one is the Goblin world of Ubisk, or the Gothixian homeworld of Naragoon. And this one could be from the Lava world Muspel. Now, construction has a lot of different crests in the system. Here's a list of all of them, but you could potentially add some more, saying that the god crests could be reworked into their proper colors. I guess some of them haven't aged well, and they have different colors than what the god actually represents now, including some of the gods that don't have crests. For example, Tumakin. Completing Sliske's endgame quest could unlock the Sliske crest. And yeah, missing regions, for example, Karamja, Turinwin, Mauritania. Updating the Varrock crest to its modern design. Crest for Fort 4 and 3. The Skull crest should be changed from red to black. The Ham crest should be reworked to actually use their logo rather than a piece of meat. And yeah, there could be a crest for completing all the champion challenges. For example, down here, you could have like a skill cape or a quest crest. Then if we move on to the throne room, behind the thrones, you could add some tapestry, for example, these ones right here. For the throne room trap, obviously you'd want to update the trap itself, but you could add a cool summoning circle or a magical trap circle into the middle. Have different colors and different designs. All could generally do the same thing potentially. And also being able to use the trap while sitting on the throne could be a good idea so that, you know, the master, the king, could execute whoever's in the trap while sitting there. Speaking of the throne, we've got a lot of concepts for thrones, but first we've got benches. Upgrade the benches. You'd have demonic benches, for example, why not, to match the demonic throne. Crystal benches and bone benches. Maybe even more types of benches, you never know. You could add tons of different themes. Here he's displaying different colors of the crystal throne, which goes back to the idea of having the different clans sell you a crystal that you can recolor crystal items with in your house. You've then also got, for example, an obsidian throne. Could be good for darker houses. Or you could have a golden throne if you want to throw hundreds of millions of coins onto it. Don't really know how much money a golden item would cost, but I could see some of them being in the 1 billion mark each, you know, just to sink as much money as possible with this. Could also potentially have a runic throne with some magical effects on it, or maybe a hunter's throne, which just has hunter pelts and a little bit more down to earth kind of vibes. Even more thrones. There's just a massive amount of thrones, honestly. An Icenic throne, for example, or a nature throne. Got a desert ancient throne, or just a full Menaphos throne. Different symbols of Menaphos gods. You have a winged throne or a draconic throne, nightmare throne. The possibilities are honestly endless with how much design you can add. Or potentially even a masterwork throne if you want to put in like 15 to 20 hours in building that thing. Similar idea to masterwork armor. You start off with a bunch of small things and then you keep combining and combining and condensing and condensing and condensing until you finally are left with the throne in the end. Kind of a neat idea. Let me know what you think about that one. Masterwork throne. And with the throne done, let's move underground into the dungeon. So the oubliette, am I saying that right? Is the first dungeon room you might fall into if you are unlucky. Being able to change the style of the walls in the dungeon would be a big upgrade. Currently, you only get, I think it's just underground dirt feelings, and then maybe some brick in that. So yeah, dungeon themes would be an obvious one. Frankly, it might connect to the current housing theme, so just being able to change the theme to whatever you want downstairs could be a good idea. Do you think that they should change the Rocknar in the 120 construction update? This thing has not, I think it's one of the oldest looking things in the game still. This might be a hot take, but I think they need to kill off the Rocknar and just update it because it looks so ugly. I can feel the evil stares from the Rocknar lovers already. But he also says that the fire pit, for example, could do with some graphical updates. You could use the fire from the pizza phase in the Zuck fight. Maybe some cracked magma flooring could be cool to change different themes of your floor. Could also include new traps like a bubbling pool of venomous acid, or maybe a quicksand pool that slows you down somehow. I'm not quite sure how that would work though, but a floor with haunted hands grabbing you down. Maybe not even haunted hands, maybe just Zautak hands grabbing you down, like Blackstone hands. Tiny, tiny Blackstone hands. Little grabby hands. And yeah, obviously you can design the cage around the trap as well, and all kinds of different materials. Make the obsidian or crystal cage. Could add some decorations to the wall, potentially like some dragonkin art or some sarcophagi. Magic glyphs on the floor too, that could do different things, like maybe use ancient magic spells to freeze you, or shadow to reduce your stats. You could also add maybe thick wall vines or jungle flowers. Maybe even gargoyles on the walls, just something to spice up the walls a little bit. For lighting, you could have candles, torches, or even the shadow anchors from Caradet, who would give off a purple lighting effect. I know which one I'm picking. Maybe add some new traps to the different rooms. like spinning blades that come out of the wall, since the whole idea for the basement is basically to have it be a dangerous place. But I mean, if you want to turn it into a wine cellar, then by all means go ahead. Nobody's forcing you to have a petting zoo in your dungeon full of traps and creatures. Increase the different tiers of door, make them more difficult to break through, maybe even give them health that you have to fight through the doors to break them open. Because the idea is you're fighting your way through the dungeon to get to the reward chest at the end. And then some rooms have different creatures that you can place on them. Currently, he says that all the creatures die in 1 or 2 hits because the scaling of the health was never updated to match the new power that we have. Maybe upgrading them to like 20,000 or 50,000 health would be an idea, so they actually take some damage. Different creatures could be animated suits of armor, or maybe elemental creatures, giant snakes, risen ghosts from necromancy, mummies, abyssal demons. Give these ones, I would say 100,000 health at least, maybe more. It says that armored phantoms could be in here, Araxites, dark beasts, ripper demons, potentially cabal warriors. Could maybe throw in a rune dragon there if you really want to. For pit traps, he suggests a scarab trap, for example, or a dragon fire bomb just like exploding onto you. Lightning trap, soul fire waves, maybe a tornado trap. Goes into detail about what all of them do. Scarab trap summons scarabs that swarm you. Dragonfire bomb could potentially instantly kill you if you don't have anti-fire protection or you don't dodge out of the way. Frost vent could be like ancient magics that would freeze you in place for a certain amount of time. He also mentions that he finds it weird that you can create dungeon tunnel areas underneath your aquarium, because the idea is that you jump into the center of the aquarium room on the normal floor and then you like kind of sink into the aquarium itself. So he's not suggesting that the aquarium take up 2 room slots, but just that you wouldn't be able to build anything on the spot underneath an aquarium because you are sinking down into that spot thematically. And here you've got the treasure room, the final room of the dungeon. So to get in, you could have a door that's been sealed with dragon metal and then potentially also magically sealed. Could say that you might need a key to open this door that's dropped randomly by a different guard around the dungeon. This could also potentially mean if you want people to race to get to the reward room, you could have them fighting creatures in the dungeon. One person might get a key really fast, enter the room, and have a higher chance of finishing the dungeon faster than someone else who didn't get lucky and get the key. Inside the final room, you could also maybe have a wall decoration like a vault. Maybe there are multiple vaults and one of them has a treasure inside of them, but you don't know which one, so you have to fight the monster in the middle and then start cracking open the walls with thieving. Maybe add some decorations to the wall like torches or just some mosaic nice art on the wall in the back. And then having different tiers of treasure chest, of course, also. Maybe even though you defeat the monster, you still have to break into the chest itself with thieving. So it could take longer depending on how difficult the chest is, how high level the chest is. And then maybe you have to fight the monster over again if it respawns before you can break open the chest. Now, in general in the house, Old School also has a display stand where you can just slap a bunch of money on it, or a tipping jar that people can put money into. So you suggest that's maybe a thing that you could do. Maybe even put on rare discontinued items to show them off. Not something that people can pick up, obviously, but just something that you can show that you own, you know, if you want to flex your party hat collection, for example. I don't know how much the coin stack in Old School costs to make, but, you know, it shouldn't be cheap at least. There could also be one, just a pile of gems on a display. Maybe even crowns of loyalty that you get from being a member over many years. He mentions that the guardian of your dungeon should, of course, be quite strong, and you could have rune dragons there, for example, or abyssal lords. Or maybe even go even crazier and have an actual boss monster in your dungeon. Make the fight a little bit challenging rather than just having a slayer creature there. It gives some different ideas for different things it could be, like a Sardoman Colossus, or maybe even a Pavasaurus Rex from Anachronia. Crazy idea, but he also mentions Crystal Hundlef from the Gauntlet in Old School, which is quite a challenging boss. I think designing an entire boss fight just for the construction update might be a little bit too much, but it's an idea, I guess. Now, one idea I'm really happy he brought up is the Leagues Hall. That's the one we could actually justify making now because RuneScape 3 has had its first league as well. And this basically just gives you a reward space for adding league rewards to the player-owned house to show off. So you could get carpets that are all themed from leagues, banners, you can display your trophies. You've got a trophy cabinet in there, might have a statue and also a display rack for the different outfits you can buy from leagues. Here they show off some of the RuneScape 3 rewards like the RuneScape 3 Sage or the Dragon Trophy, for example. And this is just a great thing to keep expanding on because you can always add new league rewards to tie into the league hall in your player-owned house. Could also even show a scroll with the pets that the owner of the house has unlocked through leagues that they can't bring outside of leagues, obviously. So some quick ideas, because there's been a lot of expanding on existing rooms, but there hasn't really been a lot of new rooms in the suggestion. And one new room is an ale cellar, which funnily enough, I mentioned earlier, if you want to convert your dungeon to that, go ahead. This is a new underground only room with a single entrance. Big fancy houses usually have a wine cellar. So in this room, you'd have a fermenting vat, you'd have a yeast barrel, shelves, spirits rack, kegs, casks. And I imagine you'd just be able to use this room as an ale creation station, much like the random places in RuneScape that already have those, like the one in Port Phasmatis, I think. I don't know how common those ales are or how many people actually make them, but you know, I think I do kind of like the thematic idea of an ale cellar. He also mentions a greenhouse or solarium, potentially. Maybe you could add in a bunch of, you know, not necessarily things that actually give you farming experience, but just a display of like things growing. For example, small plants inside of a greenhouse. Greenhouse room would obviously only be on the ground floor, and people who absolutely love putting flora everywhere could just have tons of greenhouses in their house. Another idea, he said, is balconies from the second floor. So just essentially being able to walk out onto the rooftops of the house. So creating a room essentially that is just sort of a balcony. Maybe have some chairs there, maybe a table, and then just enjoy the view from the second floor. And that's all the suggestions in this massive design document. There's a lot of cool ideas in here. I really like this. If you have any cool ideas as well, do drop those below. They are looking for feedback at the moment. And who knows, maybe they'll notice one of your ideas and add it to the update itself. Now, there hasn't been any more official stuff released about the 120 construction update since the roadmap, but I'm sure once we get closer to summer and as ideas turn into actual physical things in game, that they'll start showing us more of the upcoming features and furniture that is coming with the update. Like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.